Hello and welcome to the first video of my new YouTube channel in which I explore the biographies and backstories to the characters in the range of Pailtoy Action Force toys sold in 1983 and 1984 who subsequently appeared in the Battle Action Force comic that ran alongside the range of figures and collectibles. If you're new to Action Force, then allow me to give you a quick history. Pailtoy were a British toy company who produced their famous Action Man range in the 1960s, 1970s and early 1980s. The 12-inch tall Action Man figures were originally based on Hasbro's G.I. Joe range, as Pailtoy held the license to produce the toys in the UK. Action Man was a huge success, but in the early 80s children's habits changed when Star Wars toys were released as 3 3/4-inch figures, which rapidly became the industry standard. Pailtoy shrunk Action Man to the smaller size and renamed the range Action Force in 1982. The initial figures weren't given any kind of backstory and were based on the most popular Action Man toy releases. That changed in 1983 when Pailtoy devised 4 specific teams with a wide range of characters, each with their own names, code names, specialisms and backstories. Q-Force were the nautical team for missions on the world's oceans. SAS Force were the covert behind the line soldiers. Space Force patrolled above the Earth's atmosphere. And Z Force were the conventional land army. All 4 teams battled against the evil Baron Ironblood and his Red Shadows, who provided some of the most iconic enemy characters of any toy range ever conceived. To accompany the toys, IPC magazines published regular Action Force stories in their battle comic, which they renamed Battle Action Force. Toys and comics alike were a huge success, and kids like me in the early 80s loved trips to the toy shops to see these fantastic figures and vehicles on display, and waited eagerly for the comic to arrive so we could see which of our favourite characters would appear that week. All good things come to an end though, and in 1985 the 4 teams merged into a single Action Force team, with new characters based on the G.I. Joe A Real American Hero line after Pailtoy were taken over by Hasbro. The 4 teams were gone from the shops, but some of the characters did appear from time to time in the Battle Action Force comic, which ran until 1986. After that, Marvel Comics took over the license from IPC to publish Action Force stories, and all reference to the original 4 teams and the Red Shadows was gone, and kids like me lost an amazing range of toys and characters who had been a big part of our childhoods. So in this series I'll explore who those characters were, the stories they appeared in, and their incredible adventures. And the first of those characters I'll be looking at is a Q-Force Aqua Trooper, codenamed Shark. Shark was released as both an individual figure and was also provided with the Q-Force Stingray craft. Each card back gave further information on the figure, including their real name, place of birth and military specialisms. Every week, Battle Action Force published a data file on a particular character, which replicated the information on the card back, but also added some stunning artwork. Shark's real name is Jean-Paul Reeves, and he was born in Toulouse in France. His Action Force number is 934038, and his primary military speciality is torpedo technology. His second speciality is underwater demolition. His backstory reads as follows: swimmer of undoubted ability. Spent early years in Martinique and was involved in several complex treasure hunts for Spanish galleons. Basic military training at French Naval School, Brest, France. Top of class in torpedo training. Torpedo officer, French Navy. Joined Action Force. Took underwater demolition course. Sword of Honour. His tagline reads, Shark is a high quality fighter. Does act on his own initiative. Dislikes obeying orders. Shark first appeared in the story Action Force, published in Battle Comic in 1983, before it became Battle Action Force. In the story, Baron Ironblood and his second in command, the Black Major, lead an attack on Ascendancy Island, situated in the southern hemisphere. Once the Red Shadows take control of the island, Ironblood demands a ransom from the United Nations, threatening to detonate a super bomb if they don't comply. Q-Force are deployed to the area and start a reconnaissance mission around the island. 2 Q-Force operatives land on the island, and here we see Shark for the first time. Along with his boss, codenamed Leviathan, they approach 2 Red Shadow sentries with the purpose of capturing one for interrogation. Whilst Leviathan subdues one shadow, Shark puts the other out of action. The captured shadow is placed upon a stingray by Shark and Leviathan and taken aboard a larger swordfish craft. Interestingly, this is the one and only time that the stingray appears in an Action Force story. However, under interrogation, the fanatical Red Shadow bites into a suicide pill he had concealed in his mouth, rather than reveal details of Baron Ironblood's plans. Q-Force then take a back seat, as SAS Force and Z-Force lead a counter-invasion of Ascendancy. Everything is going to plan, and they discover the buried super bomb, but find it under the control of one of Ironblood's Muton android robots. The indestructible robot attempts to return the bomb to Ironblood, but in an amazing turn of events, Leviathan uses the water pump on the swordfish to fire freezing seawater over both the Muton and the bomb, halting them in their tracks. Realising the game is up, Ironblood orchestrates an escape, but the battle for Ascendancy is won, in large part due to Shark and his Q-Force colleagues' actions. We next see Shark in the Action Force mini-comic entitled Peril at Dragon Rocks. 5 mini-comics in total were given as free gifts with a weekly battle comic, and each one featured one of the 4 Action Force teams and the Red Shadows. In this adventure, Q-Force answer a Mayday distress call in the China Sea, which is in fact a trap created by Red Shadows. Leviathan discovers a sunken oil tanker and releases its flammable cargo into the water. The sea is then set alight, burning the Red Shadows' ships, and Q-Force escape. Shark plays only a small part in this adventure though, and is only named late on in this story. Battle then became Battle Action Force, and with that came an array of fantastic stories over the subsequent years. As part of this, a handful of the characters actually received their own origin stories, further exploring their history and padding out the information on their data files. Shark was one of those characters chosen to have their backstory told in a story named Q-Force. The story starts in Martinique, where the young Jean-Paul Rives had moved because his father, a French naval officer, had been posted there. Jean-Paul is a natural swimmer and soon fits in with the local boys. He also takes an interest in naval history, and even at this early age his career path appears to be laid out in front of him. One day, when one of the local boys called Louis decides to swim to a sunken World War II wreck and becomes surrounded by sharks, Jean-Paul decides to mount a rescue mission. He retrieves a hand grenade from the wreck and manages to throw it into the mouth of one of the beasts, causing it to explode. The 2 boys swim to safety, and because of everything that has happened, Jean-Paul is given the nickname Shark. In the next episode, an older Jean-Paul is accepted into the French Naval Academy and returns to mainland France to undergo initial training, but struggles to settle into the colder conditions and strict training environment. He begins submarine torpedo training, but in the confined conditions he begins to question whether he is cut out for this aspect of naval work. When a torpedo malfunctions, Jean-Paul bravely volunteers to swim outside the submarine to rectify the fault, which threatens to destroy the vessel and wipe out the crew. The jammed torpedo is released, but its motor fails and it starts to veer back towards the submarine. Jean-Paul selflessly grabs the motor mechanism of the torpedo and manually diverts it away from the submarine, saving everyone aboard. Jean-Paul is then posted to Marseille, where he and his fellow naval cadets are bullied by a group of legionnaires who throw them into the sea whilst they're at a restaurant. He has his revenge though by stealing the legionnaires' flag in the dead of night and using it as a tablecloth at the same restaurant when the legionnaires next visit. Meanwhile, back in Martinique, Jean-Paul's father is killed by modern-day pirates. After finding out about the murder, he returns to the Caribbean and learns about what has happened from Louis, who is now a local official. Jean-Paul starts his own investigation and discovers that the pirates may frequent a bar on the neighbouring island of St. Lucia. He covertly carries out surveillance on the bar before following one of the pirates out to their boat. However, he is discovered and narrowly dodges death after being accosted by 2 frogmen. He returns to Martinique, where Louis tries to ship him off to France back to naval school. Jean-Paul cunningly gives the authorities the slip though before his plane takes off, and recommences the search for his father's killers. He makes his way back to St. Lucia and continues his surveillance on who he thinks are the pirates. He rings Louis to share his suspicions with him. Jean-Paul follows the pirates to their boat and attempts to take control of the radio so he can alert the authorities. However, he learns that the pirates are actually British naval officers who are also trailing the accursed pirates. And worse still, he discovers that Louis is in fact the evil mastermind leading them, and Louis is now hot on his trail. Jean-Paul and the British officers become embroiled in a mid-sea gunfight with the pirates, who heavily outnumber them. The British ship is set alight by the pirates, so Jean-Paul and the last British officer grab some scuba gear and hide underwater. They are surrounded by sharks and the game seems to be finally up. Jean-Paul has one last trick up his sleeve though. He swims towards the pirate's boat, closely followed by a shark. At the last moment he dodges a shark, which crashes into the boat like a torpedo. This throws the pirates off guard, which Jean-Paul and the British officer take advantage of and board their ship in a counter-attack. But Louis appears to have the final word, as he aims a deck gun at Jean-Paul, who is momentarily distracted. Incredibly though, a shark jumps out from the sea and takes Louis in its jaws, before diving back into the water, taking the doomed Louis with it. Jean-Paul and the British officer take control of the boat and hold the pirates prisoner until the authorities arrive. The two talk and the British officer reveals he's a Scotsman called Jamie Hugh McLaren, the future leader of Q-Force, Leviathan. They depart, destined to fight together again as future members of Action Force. Shark's next appearance is in the big Q-Force story entitled Sea Fury. The Action Force team are deployed in a swordfish craft to the South Atlantic to investigate the disappearance of 3 South American Navy warships. Using sonar, the team find the wreck of a vessel and Shark dons his scuba equipment to go and investigate. He discovers it is one of the Navy warships and that it has been stripped of all its weaponry. While swimming around the wreck, he is stealthily approached by Red Shadow frogmen, intent on killing him. Despite being outnumbered, Shark fights back valiantly and realises he must get back to the swordfish to warn his teammates. He's too late though, and the Shadows manage to capture Shark and the other 2 Q-Force men and take control of the swordfish. The 3 of them are taken before Baron Ironblood aboard his own enormous warship, and he reveals his plans to take over the world's merchant shipping. Despite the precariousness of their situation, Shark and his colleagues try to escape by starting a fistfight with their captors. Shark saves Leviathan's life by attacking an armed Red Shadow who is about to shoot him. Leviathan subsequently manages to escape by diving into the sea, while Shark is taken captive once again. Shark and his other captured teammate, codenamed Phones, are locked deep in the bowels of the Baron's ship, whilst Leviathan tries to free them under cover of darkness. He makes his way down to where the other 2 Q-Force men are being held, but he is discovered by a team of Red Shadows. But Shark, hearing what is happening outside, barges a cell door open into the shadows, and he and Phones overpower them. The 3 colleagues make their way to the deck and dive overboard, before swimming to a nearby island, pursued by Red Shadows and the Black Major. They evade capture and swim back to the warship, intent on stopping Ironblood's insane plan once and for all. They sneak on board and Shark overpowers a Red Shadow guard. Leviathan nominates Shark to disguise himself as a Red Shadow, so they can make their way down into the ship so that they can set off explosives and sink the vessel. They make their way to a weapons store, and Shark plants explosives there, but they are discovered by Ironblood himself. Leviathan pursues the evil genius, and orders Shark and Phones to concentrate on setting the timers. The Baron escapes though, and Leviathan narrowly evades death. He makes his way to the deck, where Shark is still disguised as a Red Shadow, having successfully planted the explosives. The 3 of them battle their way off the warship, and escape in the swordfish just before the explosives are detonated, blowing it to smithereens. Shark and his colleagues watch the warship sink and reflect on whether they have put pay to the Baron, but as usual he has escaped and vows to have his revenge on Q-Force. As well as the comic strips, Battle Action Force also published combat files, which each week featured different characters from either the 4 teams or the Red Shadows. Shark made one appearance in a combat file called Q-Force Under Attack, in which he and his teammates narrowly escape from a great white. We next see Shark in a story called Operation Spearhead, which involves all 4 Action Force teams, although Q-Force only play a minor role. In this adventure, Baron Ironblood invades a peaceful country in the Far East and overtakes a parliament, declaring himself as ruler. Aided by Space Force, the SAS and Z-Force lead a counterinsurgency, forcing Baron Ironblood and the Black Major to escape in a boat in the harbour. Q-Force go to intercept them in a swordfish, but the Baron orders the Black Major to fire a torpedo at them. Shark is ordered to aim the swordfish's torpedo at the missile that is hurtling towards them. Using all his skills, he fires a torpedo and the 2 missiles explode in the water. Ironblood orders the Black Major to ram the swordfish, forcing Shark and the Q-Force men to dive into the water in the nick of time. Shark and his colleagues survive, and Ironblood is presumed dead, but he too jumped clear and lives to dream up further plans for world domination. Shark doesn't appear in the next big Q-Force story called Operation Sea Lion, but does reappear in a joint Q-Force and Space Force adventure called Crossfire. 2 Space Force astronauts are attacked in deep space by Red Shadow ships. Their cosmic cruiser hurtles to Earth and sinks to the bottom of the sea at the North Pole. Q-Force and Shark are deployed to effect a rescue, but the Black Major and a team of Red Shadows are also sent to the area in a hydrofoil to try and capture them. Shark and a colleague don deep-sea diver suits and swim down to the depths to locate the cruiser. However, Shadow Frogmen attempt to kill them before they have the chance to rescue the stricken Space Force men. Shark is attacked by an axe-wielding Shadow, who strikes out at him but narrowly misses. The Shadow swings again though, this time hitting Shark, who is knocked down to the seabed. Mustering all his strength, Shark kicks out at the Shadow using his heavy diver's boots, knocking the Shadow back to the surface. The Shadows had attached a cable to the cosmic cruiser though, and start to raise it from the bottom. Shark cuts a line and attaches a sea mine to it. His plan works, and instead of capturing the cruiser, the enemy hydrofoil is badly damaged. With the Red Shadows no longer a threat, Shark and Q-Force rescue their grateful Action Force colleagues and bring them to the surface. And that's the last we see of Shark in the comic. Q-Force played an increasingly small role in the overall storyline, although we are told that they did continue to play a part in the wider counter-terrorism operations, but Shark doesn't make another appearance. And I think that's a real shame. In my opinion, he's a really interesting character whose backstory is fully explored, and he plays an integral part in Q-Force's adventures. Time and time again, he saves the day and is pivotal to the ocean-bound efforts to thwart Baron Ironblood. So that's the end of my first Action Force biography. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button. And feel free to put your comments below. I'd be very happy to know what you think. If the video proves popular, I'd love to make more of them and fully explore the whole Action Force world and the characters that made it so special. Goodbye for now, and thanks for watching.